Morning brief, one door closes. America cracks wide open, November 17th, 1928. Chicago, cold as steel. Bumpy Johnson, a 23-year-old black numbers runner from Harlem, walks into the Lexington Hotel to meet Al Capone. A forbidden meeting in the heart of brutal segregation. If exposed, both men lose face. But what could force Chicago's most powerful kingpin to secretly shake hands with a colored kid? And what deal was strong enough to make Bumpy Johnson untouchable for the next 40 years? Chicago 9, 47 a.m. The Lexington Hotel stands like a fortress on South Michigan Avenue, its limestone facade catching the weak November sun. Inside, the air smells of cigar smoke, expensive cologne, and something else fear carefully bottled and distributed in measured doses. The lobby staff moves with the practiced efficiency of people paid to forget. A bellhop glides past carrying luggage that will never be opened. A desk clerk studies paperwork that doesn't exist. Lexington, you don't see things. You survive by not seeing things. Al Capone owns the 4th floor, not rents, owns. The entire level has been converted into a command center disguised as luxury suites. Bulletproof windows, steel-reinforced doors, phone lines that route through 3 different exchanges before reaching their destination. This isn't just a hotel. It's a shadow government headquarters operating in plain sight while federal agents stand helpless on the street below. By late 1928, Capone sits at the apex of American organized crime. His bootlegging empire generates an estimated $100 million annually, roughly $1.8 billion in today's money. He controls speakeasies, brothels, gambling dens, and police precincts across Chicago. Judges rule in his favor. Aldermen pass his laws. Even the mayor keeps his picture turned face down when Capone's name comes up in conversation. But empires built on violence have a structural weakness. Violence is expensive. St. Valentine's Day massacre still lies 9 weeks in the future, but the groundwork is already being laid. Capone's war with Bugs Moran's North Side Gang has turned Chicago streets into a shooting gallery. 7 men killed in 1 month, 11 the month before. Each death costs money bribes to witnesses, payoffs to cops' legal fees for the rare occasions someone actually gets arrested. Federal agents are circling. Treasury Department investigators have started mapping Capone's financial networks, following money trails through front companies and offshore accounts. They can't prove murder, but they're building something else, a tax case. The kind of case that doesn't require witnesses who might suddenly develop amnesia or catch bullets. And then there's the territorial problem. Every gang war is essentially a dispute over market share. When Capone's men kill a rival bootlegger, they're not just eliminating competition, they're destroying their own profit margins. Rivals don't pay protection money. Burned down speakeasies don't generate revenue. Violence, Capone is learning, is a tax on everyone involved. He needs new revenue streams, sustainable ones, markets that don't require constant bloodshed to maintain. Which brings us to the man in the lobby being patted down for the 2nd time in 10 minutes. Bumpy Johnson stands with his arms spread face neutral, while 2 of Capone's enforcers run their hands along his ribs, checking for weapons. They find nothing, not because Bumpy came unarmed, he's not that stupid, but because he left his piece with his driver 3 blocks away. Walking into Capone's headquarters, armed, would be suicide. Walking in completely defenseless might be suicide too, but at least it shows respect. The visual is striking deliberately so. Bumpy Johnson is young, 23, but carries himself with the coiled tension of someone much older. He wears a dark suit, well-tailored, but not flashy. His shoes are shined. Collar is crisp. Everything about his appearance says, "I belong here," but his skin says otherwise. 1928. America doesn't do subtlety about race. The color line isn't a suggestion, it's a physical reality, enforced with ropes and bullets and laws that make it legal to kill a black man for looking at a white woman the wrong way. Chicago might be more liberal than Mississippi, but more liberal is a low bar. Most white establishments won't serve black customers. Most white neighborhoods will burn crosses on your lawn if you try to move in. And here's Bumpy Johnson walking into the operational headquarters of the most powerful white criminal organization in America, about to sit at a table where the wrong word could get him disappeared into Lake Michigan. The enforcers finish their search. One of them, a thick-necked Italian named Frankie, jerks his head toward the elevator. No words, just movement. They ride to the 4th floor in silence. Elevator operator, a slight man with hollow eyes, stares straight ahead. He's seen this before. Men going up to see Capone. Some come back down. Some don't. The hallway is plush, thick carpet that swallows sound wallpaper that probably costs more than most people's monthly rent. Doors line both sides, all closed, all quiet. Behind one of them, Bumpy knows accountants are tallying receipts from 100 illegal operations. Behind another lawyers are drafting briefs to keep Capone's men out of prison. Behind a third enforcers are planning the hits that will happen tonight, tomorrow, next week. They stop at a door at the end of the hall. Frankie knocks 3 times 2, quick 1 slow. A recognition pattern. The door opens. The room inside is set up like a private dining room. A long mahogany table dominates the center. Fine china sits at each place, setting though no food has been served. Crystal glasses wait to be filled. Chandelier hangs overhead, its light reflected in the polished wood surface. 3 men sit at the table. Al Capone occupies the head position naturally. He's 39 years old, thick-bodied, with a face that's handsome, in a brutal sort of way. The famous scars on his left cheek, 3 parallel lines from a knife fight in his youth, catch the light when he turns his head. He wears a gray suit that cost more than a factory worker's annual salary. His tie is silk. His watch is gold. Everything about him broadcasts power. To his right sits Jake Greasy Thumb, Guzik Capone's chief accountant and political fixer. Guzik is the organization's brain, the man who transforms violence into legitimate-looking business transactions. He has connections in every major bank in Chicago, relationships with city officials that go back decades. When Capone needs a problem solved with money instead of bullets, Guzik solves it. To Capone's left is Frank Nitti, the organization's enforcer-in-chief. He will eventually take over the outfit when Capone goes to prison, but right now, he's the man who makes bodies disappear. He's slim, almost elegant, with dead eyes that never blink. Nitti doesn't threaten. He doesn't need to. His presence is the threat. No one else is in the room. No waiters, no bodyguards, just the 3 of them waiting. Capone gestures to a chair halfway down the table. "Sit." Bumpy sits. The chair is positioned so the light hits his face directly, while leaving Capone's in shadow, an old interrogation trick. Every detail of this meeting has been choreographed to establish dominance. For a long moment, nobody speaks. Capone lights a cigar, takes his time with it, letting the silence stretch. Guzik shuffles papers. Nitti just stares. Then Capone does something unexpected. He stands, walks around the table, and extends his hand. Bumpy rises, shakes it. Capone's grip is firm testing, but not crushing. Handshake lasts exactly 3 seconds, long enough to establish contact, short enough to maintain authority. This is the moment the photograph should capture if photographs were allowed. The most powerful gangster in America, shaking hands with a black numbers runner from Harlem, breaking the color line in the most literal way possible, skin touching skin, in full view of witnesses who could destroy both their reputations. Capone returns to his seat, leans back. Smoke curls from his cigar. Then he asks the question that will determine whether Bumpy Johnson walks out of this room alive. So, what does Harlem want? And Bumpy understands answer wrong, and he disappears. Answer right, and he changes everything. The question hangs in the air like gun smoke. What does Harlem want? It's not really a question. It's a test. Capone is giving Bumpy a chance to humiliate himself, to beg. Play the role 1928 America expects from a young black man sitting across from powerful white men, grateful, deferential, small. Most people in Bumpy's position would take the bait. They'd talk about respect, about opportunity, about just wanting a fair shake. They'd position themselves as supplicants asking for mercy from a king. Bumpy Johnson doesn't beg. Harlem wants what you want, Bumpy says. His voice is level, almost flat. Profit without war. Guzik's pen stops moving. Nitty's eyes narrow slightly. Capone takes a long pull from his cigar, studying Bumpy through the smoke. That right. Capone's tone is casual, but there's an edge underneath. You think you know what I want. I think you're spending $50,000 a month fighting the North Side, Bumpy says. I think every dead body costs you $10,000 in bribes and legal fees. I think the feds are building a case, and all this violence is giving them ammunition. He pauses. Lets that sink in. I think, Bumpy continues, you're looking at what happens when Prohibition ends, because it will end. Maybe next year, maybe in 5 years, but it's coming, and when it does, you need new revenue, clean revenue, the kind that doesn't require you to kill someone every week to protect it. The silence that follows is different than before. Capone isn't testing anymore. He's listening. Bumpy presses forward. Harlem runs numbers, policy games, been running them for 10 years since Madame Stephanie St. Clair set up the first bank. We move about 20 million a year through the system. He doesn't look at Guzik, but he knows the accountant is already doing math in his head. 20 million. Even a small percentage of that is serious money. Dutch Schultz wants that market, Bumpy continues. He's been raiding our spots for 6 months now, burning policy banks, killing runners, trying to muscle his way in. You know what it's costing him. Tell me. Capone leans forward slightly. $50,000 a month. Same as your war with Moran. And he's got nothing to show for it, because Harlem won't break. You can't terrorize a community that's already living under terror. You can't scare people who get called boy by cops and nigger by judges. Schultz is learning what you already know. Violence is expensive, and it doesn't always work. Bumpy pulls a folded paper from his inside jacket pocket. Moves slowly, carefully. Anything fast could get him shot. He slides it across the table to Guzik. Cost breakdown, Bumpy says. Schultz's war in Harlem. Raids, bribes, muscle property damage. Every dollar he spends trying to take our numbers operation. Guzik unfolds the paper. His eyebrows rise slightly, the first genuine reaction Bumpy has seen from him. "These numbers accurate?" Guzik asks. "Everyone." Bumpy's voice doesn't waver. "I've got receipts if you want them. Schultz isn't hiding his war. He's proud of it. Thinks overwhelming force will make us fold." "But you haven't folded," Capone observes. "No, sir, because we're not just defending territory. We're defending survival. Harlem numbers aren't just a racket, they're infrastructure. They're how working people buy groceries when they hit. They're how landlords get paid. They're how the community circulates money that white banks won't touch. You can't kill that with bullets. You have to buy it. Now comes the pitch, the moment everything hinges on. So here's what Harlem wants," Bumpy says. "We want Schultz called off. We want protection from raids, not complete protection, that's impossible, but advance warning. We want neutrality from the other boroughs. And we want dispute resolution that doesn't end in bodies. In exchange for Capone knows this is coming. 20%. The number lands like a hand grenade on the table. Nitty laughs a short, sharp bark. 20% of 20 million. You want to pay us $4 million a year to leave you alone. Not to leave us alone. Bumpy corrects. To keep others from killing us. There's a difference. You're not selling protection from yourself. You're selling protection from everyone else. Schultz, the Italians in East Harlem, the Irish in Hell's Kitchen, every two-bit gangster who thinks he can walk into Harlem and take what we built. Why would we do that? Nitty asks. Why wouldn't we just take it ourselves? Come in with 100 men and own it outright? This is the question Bumpy has been waiting for, the one he's rehearsed 100 times. Because you'd fail, he says simply. Not might fail, would fail. Harlem isn't Chicago. You can't buy our cops because our cops hate us anyway. You can't threaten our politicians because they're already bought by Tammany Hall. You can't terrorize our community because we've been terrorized since the day we were born. Everything you've got, your muscle, your connections, your reputation works because you're operating in a world that respects those things. Harlem doesn't respect them. Harlem survives in spite of them. He lets that sink in before continuing. But you can work with us. You can take 20% of a system that's already running smooth, already profitable, already stable. No war, no overhead, no bodies, just money every quarter, clean as church. Capone hasn't moved. His cigar has burned down to ash, but he hasn't noticed. You're not asking for equality, he says finally. It's not a question. No, sir, I'm asking for autonomy. There's a difference. Equality means we sit at the same table. Autonomy means you let us run our table, and we pay rent for the privilege. And if we say no, then Schultz keeps burning money trying to take Harlem. Then you keep reading about bodies in the Amsterdam news. And the feds keep building their case, and every dead black policy runner is another piece of evidence that organized crime in New York is out of control. Bumpy leans forward slightly, not aggressive, just intense. But if you say yes, you've got $4 million a year coming in from a market you didn't have to fight for. You've got a model for how to manage other ethnic territories without constant war. And you've got a buffer between the Italian mobs and the rest of Harlem, a buffer that keeps the peace and makes everyone money. The silence stretches. Guzik is writing notes. Nitty is staring at Bumpy like he's trying to decide which part of Lake Michigan to drop him in. Capone is doing something more dangerous, he's thinking. Finally, Capone smiles. It's not a friendly smile. It's the smile of a shark that's just spotted something interesting in the water. "You came here alone," Capone says. "That takes balls. Stupid balls, maybe. But balls." "Came here with something more valuable than balls," Bumpy replies. "I came with math." Capone laughs a genuine laugh this time. He looks at Guzik. "What do you think?" "I think," Guzik says slowly, "we should hear more." And just like that, the door opens. Not literally, the physical door stays closed, but something shifts in the room. The test is over. The negotiation begins. Capone stubs out his cigar. "All right, Harlem, let's talk numbers." For exactly 60 seconds, nobody speaks. Capone stands and walks to the window. From the 4th floor of the Lexington, you can see most of South Michigan Avenue, the traffic, the pedestrians, the cops on their beats. His empire spread out below like a map. But empires have expiration dates, and Capone knows it better than anyone. "The numbers game," he says, finally still facing the window. "How's it work, the real mechanics, not the street-level shit, the infrastructure?" Bumpy doesn't hesitate. This is the part he prepared for. 3 layers. Street runners collect bets, usually nickels and dimes, from working people. They hit a specific route every day. Barbershops, diners, factories. The bets go on slips coded by location and collector. "How many runners?" Guzik asks Penn, already moving. "In Harlem, about 300 active at any given time. Each one handles maybe 40-50 regular customers. Some more, some less, depends on the neighborhood." "That's 15,000 potential bettors," Guzik calculates aloud. "Call it 10,000 active on any given day. Average bet is what, a quarter? Closer to 30 cents, Bumpy corrects. People betting their lunch money, hoping to hit. 3,000 a day gross, times 30 days, 90,000 a month from street action alone." Guzik's pen scratches faster. "Multiply that across the numbers operations in Harlem. Yeah, 20 million a year tracks." Capone turns from the window. "It's the payout structure. 600 to 1 if you hit the number straight. Most places pay 540 to 1 and pocket the difference as house edge. The number comes from the last 3 digits of the daily handle at specific racetracks. Belmont Aqueduct depends on the season. Can't be fixed, can't be predicted. Pure chance." "Smart," Nitti admits grudgingly. "No one can accuse you of rigging it if the number comes from a public source." "Exactly. Trust is everything. You lose trust, you lose the game." Capone returns to his seat, but doesn't sit. He stands behind his chair, hands gripping the back. "Here's my problem," he says. "Prohibition's dying. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year. But it's coming. The temperance ladies are losing steam. The wets are getting louder. Politicians are starting to talk repeal." He pauses, making sure everyone's listening. "When that happens, my revenue drops by 60% overnight. Speakeasies go legit, which means taxes and regulation. The breweries get licensed. The whole game changes. I need to pivot before that happens. I need new markets that don't depend on something being illegal." "Gambling," Bumpy says. "Gambling," Capone confirms. "But not just gambling. Organized gambling. Systematic. The kind of operation that runs smooth whether I'm in town or in Florida. The kind that scales." He leans forward, and for the first time, Bumpy sees something unexpected in Capone's eyes: respect. "Your number system is better than ours," Capone says bluntly. "The Italians run gambling, sure. Craps, games, card rooms, horse books. But it's all ad hoc. every operation is independent. No standardization, no real infrastructure. You hit one of our gambling dens, you find a different system every time. Different odds, different payout schedules, different record keeping. Guzik nods. It's inefficient, hard to audit, hard to scale. But your system, Capone continues, that's elegant. Standardized betting slips, daily collection routes, centralized banks that process everything. A payout structure everyone understands. You've built a machine, and I want to know how it works. The room temperature seems to drop 10 degrees. Bumpy understands immediately what's being asked. This isn't just about money anymore. Capone wants the blueprint. He wants to learn the system so he can replicate it in Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, every city where his organization operates. You want technology transfer, Bumpy says slowly. I want partnership, Capone corrects. Real partnership, not just you paying tribute and hoping we leave you alone. I want to learn your system. I want to understand how you process bets, how you manage runners, how you keep books that the cops can't crack even when they raid you. And in exchange, you get something more valuable than protection. What's that? A national network. The words hang there like smoke. Capone sits now, leaning back, fingers steepled. Here's what I'm thinking. Harlem runs its numbers. You pay 15%, not 20%. I'm cutting you a deal because I want cooperation, not just compliance. But 3 of your best people come to Chicago for 3 months. They train my people on your system. How to set up routes, how to manage banks, how to keep the books clean. And in return, Bumpy asks, though he already knows. In return, you become my liaison, not just for Harlem, for every Black Numbers operation in every city where we operate. Detroit wants to set up policy games. They go through you. Baltimore wants to expand. You broker the deal. St. Louis, Kansas City, Cleveland. Anywhere there's a Black community running numbers, you're the bridge. Guzik adds. You become the franchise model. We don't come in and take over. We let local operators run their own territories, pay their percentage, and operate under a unified system. No one makes money. No one goes to war. It's brilliant, diabolical, and completely unexpected. Capone isn't just trying to muscle in on Harlem. He's trying to create a national gambling syndicate using the numbers game as the foundation. And he wants Bumpy to be the architect. There's a problem, Bumpy says carefully. A big one. The race thing, Capone says flatly. The race thing, Bumpy confirms. You think your boys are going to take orders from a Black man. You think the Italian families in Detroit and Cleveland are going to accept me walking in and telling them how to run their operations. They will if I tell them to, Capone says. There's steel in his voice now. Anyone who's got a problem with it can take it up with Frank. Nitti smiles. It's not a nice smile. But that's exactly why this stays secret. Capone continues. Public face, I'm backing you off Harlem because it's not worth the war. Behind the scenes, we're building something bigger. Not my employee. You're not my partner. You're my consultant. The guy who knows how to make the machine run smooth. And when people ask why you're listening to me, I tell them you've got information I need, which is true. I tell them you're useful, which is also true. I don't tell them you're teaching my entire organization how to modernize. That part stays between us. Bumpy thinks it through. The risks are enormous. If word gets out that he's collaborating this closely with Capone, he's finished in Harlem. The community would never accept it. Madame St. Clair would put a bullet in him herself. But if it works, Harlem gets protection from the biggest criminal organization in America. Black numbers operations across the country get legitimacy and backup, and Bumpy Johnson becomes the most connected black gangster in American history. 15%, Bumpy says. 3 trainers for 3 months. Stay here as liaison, but I travel back to Harlem every 2 weeks. And one more thing. What's that? If this goes sideways, if the deal breaks down, if someone decides they don't want to honor the arrangement, I need a guarantee. Something that makes sure neither side can just walk away or turn on the other. Capone considers this. What kind of guarantee? Mutual exposure, Bumpy says. We both keep records of this deal. Coded hidden, but real. If you turn on Harlem, those records go to the feds and the newspapers. If Harlem breaks the deal, our records go to the same places. Mutually assured destruction. You want to blackmail me? Nitty's voice is dangerous. I want to make sure we're all honest, Bumpy replies calmly. Because right now, I'm asking my community to trust the word of a man who kills people for a living. And you're asking your organization to work with people they've been taught to see as inferior. The only way this works is if both sides have skin in the game. Real skin. The silence is absolute. Then Capone laughs. You got brass ones, kid. I'll give you that. He looks at Guzik, who nods slowly, then at Nitty, who shrugs a gesture that says, Your funeral. All right, Capone says. 15%, 3 months training. You're the liaison, and we both keep insurance. But here's the catch. If anyone asks about this meeting, it never happened. You came to Chicago to negotiate territory. We had a conversation. We reached an understanding. That's it. No technology transfer, no national network, no partnership. Agreed, Bumpy says. And one more thing. Capone's eyes are hard now. If this leaks, if I find out you told someone outside your inner circle, if this shows up in a newspaper, if some cop starts asking too many questions, the deal's off and you're done. Not just the deal. You. Understand. Understood. Capone extends his hand again. Time, when Bumpy shakes it, he's not just sealing a protection deal. He's reshaping the entire landscape of organized crime in America. Welcome to the big leagues, Capone says, and Bumpy Johnson thinks I just made a deal with the devil. Now, I have to make sure Harlem survives it. The phone call to Harlem happens at 11:47 p.m. that same night. Bumpy sits alone in a hotel room 3 blocks from the Lexington neutral ground, swept for bugs by one of Capone's technicians. The phone in front of him is a direct line installed that afternoon, running through 3 different exchanges to make tracing impossible. He dials the number from memory. It rings twice. Yes. The voice is crisp, French-accented, unmistakably female. It's done, Bumpy says. Stephanie St. Clair, Madam Queen, as Harlem knows her exhales slowly on the other end. Tell me. 15% quarterly. Protection from raids, advance warning, when possible. Dispute resolution, through me. Territory autonomy guaranteed. And what did you give them? This is the hard part. 3 trainers, 3 months, teaching them the numbers system, and I stay on as national liaison for black operations in other cities. The silence stretches for 10 seconds, 15, 20. You gave them our blueprint, St. Clair says finally. Her voice is cold. I gave them a version of the blueprint, enough to make them happy. Not enough to make them independent. And you trust them. I trust their self-interest. War costs money. This makes money. As long as the math works, the deal works. Another pause. Bumpy can hear her thinking, weighing, calculating the same way Guzik did earlier. Who knows? She asks. On their side, Capone, Guzik, Nitti. On our side, you, me, and whoever you decide needs to know. That's it. This leaks, we're both dead. And the humiliation. You sitting in that room with those men negotiating our survival like we're beggars. I sat in that room like a businessman, Bumpy says quietly. I brought them numbers. I showed them profit. I made them believe that partnership is smarter than conquest. That's not begging. That's strategy. St. Clair is quiet for a long moment. Then, how long do we have to make the first payment? 30 days. End of the quarter. 475,000 delivered through their collection system. Guzik will send details. And if we refuse, then Schultz comes back with more muscle. Then the Italians from East Harlem push west. Then every two-bit gangster in New York smells blood and comes running. We can fight. We can probably even win for a while. But it'll cost everything we've built. He hears her light a cigarette. The scratch of the match loud over the phone. All right, she says. We'll make the payment. Bumpy. If this goes bad, if they betray us, if this becomes a collar around our necks, then I'm the first one you shoot. Bumpy finishes. I know. Good. Come home when you can. Harlem needs to see you're still alive. The line goes dead. Bumpy sits in the dark for a while, thinking about what he's just set in motion. The framework is elegant in its simplicity. 4 pillars, each one essential territory. Harlem and other black neighborhoods retain full operational control. Capone's people don't run the games, don't manage the runners, don't collect the bets. The community polices itself operates, itself profits from itself. This isn't conquest, it's a franchise agreement. Tribute 15% of gross revenue paid quarterly. The money gets laundered through legitimate businesses, dry cleaners, restaurants, barber shops, then delivered through a collection system that keeps both sides at arm's length. No direct hand-to-hand. Paper trail that connects Capone to black policy operations. If the feds raid, they find separate organizations doing separate business. Protection. This is the real product being sold. Capone uses his political connections to reduce police raids. When raids do happen, warnings come 48 hours in advance. Enough time to clear the banks, hide the records, make the place look clean. More importantly, Capone's reputation creates a buffer. Other gangs know Harlem is under understanding. Coming after policy operations means risking war with the Chicago outfit. Most decide it's not worth it. Dispute resolution. This is Bumpy's role. When conflicts arise, a runner gets caught working both sides. A bank gets robbed by outside talent, territorial boundaries. Get Fuzzy Bumpy mediates. He's the bridge, the translator, the man who speaks both languages and belongs fully to neither world. It's a system built on mutual need, disguised as mutual respect. There's a 5th pillar unspoken, but understood by everyone involved: secrecy. This is where the real genius lies and the real danger. Neither side can afford to be honest about what they're doing. For Capone, working openly with black gangsters is reputation poison. His organization depends on a hierarchy that places Italian and Irish criminals at the top, everyone else below. His men expect him to take what he wants, not negotiate for it. If word gets out that he's sitting at tables with black numbers runners, treating them like equals, his own people might start questioning his leadership. The white press would have a field day. Capone bows to Negro gangsters. The Italian families in New York and Detroit would see weakness. Rivals would sense opportunity. So the public story is simple. Capone considered moving on Harlem, decided it wasn't worth the trouble, and let the black numbers operations continue unmolested. Gesture of contemptuous dismissal, not partnership. Face saved. For Harlem, the calculation is even more fraught. The black community has spent decades building institutions that operate outside white control. Churches, businesses, social clubs, and yes, numbers operations, all of them exist because black people couldn't access white establishments. They're not just economic entities, they're symbols of autonomy, dignity, resistance, admitting that Harlem's numbers game now pays tribute to a white gangster that would shatter the illusion of independence. It would feel like surrender. Like selling out. Worse, it would be true. So the story in Harlem becomes Bumpy Johnson went to Chicago and made Capone back down. He stood up to the most powerful gangster in America and walked away with Harlem's independence intact. A victory, not a compromise. Both stories are lies. Both stories are necessary. This is the unspoken code everyone involved has to maintain the fiction. Tribute payments happen in shadow. The trainers go to Chicago quietly, their absence explained as business trips or family matters. Bumpy's trips back and forth get framed as keeping an eye on expansion rather than serving as Capone's liaison. The system works because both sides need it to work, and it stays hidden because both sides need it hidden. There's one more element darker than the rest: enforcement. Rules mean nothing without consequences. So the framework includes punishment protocols carefully designed to avoid escalation. If a Harlem runner gets caught skimming, Harlem handles it internally. St. Clair's people administer the beating, the warning, or, in extreme cases, the disappearance. Capone's organization never touches him. This prevents the situation from becoming Chicago muscle-attacking black community members. If one of Capone's collectors gets greedy and tries to shake down policy operations outside the agreed framework, Bumpy reports it. Capone's people handle discipline. This keeps Harlem from having to respond violently to white gangsters, which would invite retaliation and war. The message is clear: break the rules, and your own side punishes you. This transforms every potential conflict from us versus them into organization versus individual. It's brilliant, cold-blooded, but brilliant. Bumpy stands, walks to the window. Chicago sprawls below its lights, stretching to the horizon. Somewhere out there, Capone is probably having a similar conversation with his lieutenants, explaining why this deal makes sense, why it's not weakness, why it's the future. And somewhere in New York, St. Clair is smoking another cigarette, looking out at Harlem, wondering if she just saved her community or sold it. The truth, Bumpy knows, is both. He's built a system that might keep Harlem safe for years, but he's also built a cage, however gilded. The tribute will always be paid. The connection will always exist. Harlem's autonomy is real, but it's autonomy on a leash. The question isn't whether it's right or wrong. The question is whether it's survivable, and whether, when the history books are written and the secrets finally come out, anyone will understand why it was necessary. He closes the curtains and goes to bed. Tomorrow, the real work begins. February 28, 929, 3 months after the Lexington meeting. The first payment arrives not as cash in a briefcase, but as laundered receipts from 11 different legitimate businesses. A dry cleaning chain shows increased revenue. A restaurant reports better than expected quarterly earnings. A trucking company's books reflect a surge in delivery contracts. The money flows through corporate accounts gets converted to cashier's checks, passes through 2 more intermediaries, and finally lands in a Chicago bank that Guzik controls. By the time it completes the journey, it's clean enough to pass any audit. $475,000. 15% of Harlem's numbers gross for the previous quarter. The first tribute payment in what will become a 15-year relationship. When Bumpy receives confirmation that the money cleared, he's in a barbershop on 125th Street, getting his hair cut like it's any other Thursday. But his hands are shaking slightly as he folds the coded telegram and slides it into his pocket. It's real now. Not just a deal struck in a Chicago hotel room, but a living, breathing system with money moving through its veins. The barber, a man named Curtis, who's been cutting hair in Harlem since 1915, catches Bumpy's eye in the mirror. "You good, I'm good," Bumpy says, but he's not sure that's true. The changes start small, easy to miss if you're not looking for them. Police raids on policy banks drop by 40% over the next 2 months. Raids do happen. They're always on a Tuesday or Thursday, never Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, which are collection days. The cops seem to have gotten unlucky with their timing. Except it's not luck. It's the phone calls Bumpy receives every Sunday night listing the locations that are hot for the coming week. Just enough warning to move the books, stash the cash leave, nothing but empty rooms and confused customers when the police kick in the doors. Dutch Schultz makes one more attempt to push into Harlem in March 1929. His muscle hits 3 policy banks in a coordinated strike, trying to prove that the Harlem understanding is a myth. 2 weeks later, Schultz's men start having problems in the Bronx. Shipments get hijacked, speakeasies get raided. Informants suddenly remember things they saw. Schultz can't prove it's connected to his Harlem operation, but the message is clear. Leave black numbers alone, or your other business suffers. April, Schultz pulls back completely. The Harlem policy operations continue unmolested. The community notices. How could they not? Something changed. A runner named Tommy tells Bumpy one evening, "Used to be, we'd lose a bank every other week. Cops would bust in, tear the place apart, haul everyone downtown. Now it's quiet. Real quiet. Maybe we got smarter," Bumpy suggests. "Maybe," Tommy says, but he doesn't sound convinced. The truth can't stay completely hidden. Too many people notice the patterns, the reduced violence, the convenient timing of raids, the way disputes that used to end in shootings now get resolved through negotiation. Whispers start, rumors. Bumpy made a deal. St. Clair's paying someone off. Chicago's got a piece of the action. But whispers aren't proof. And in Harlem, where survival often depends on not asking too many questions, most people accept the peace and don't interrogate its origins too closely. Still, there are costs. Several costs that keep Bumpy awake at night. Every quarterly payment is money that could have stayed in Harlem, could have funded community programs, supported businesses, helped families. Instead, it flows out to Chicago, enriching a white gangster who wouldn't piss on Harlem if it was on fire, unless there was profit in it. That's the cage, the golden cage that keeps Harlem safe, but never free. Bumpy sees it in St. Clair's eyes sometimes when they meet to discuss business. She's pragmatic enough to accept the deal, but it costs her something every time she counts out the tribute. Pride, maybe, or the dream of what true independence might have looked like. "We're paying for the privilege of running our own neighborhood," she says one night after the second quarterly payment clears. "We're paying for stability, bumpy counters, for peace, for the chance to build something without worrying about Schultz or the Italians or whoever else wants a piece." And when the price goes up, because it will, they always do, then we renegotiate, or we walk away. Can we? St. Clair's question is genuine. Walk away, or are we in too deep now? Bumpy doesn't have an answer, because the truth is, the system has momentum now. Other cities are watching. In Detroit, black policy operators hear about the Harlem model and reach out. Bumpy travels there in May, sits down with local operators and representatives from the Detroit Partnership, the Italian mob that controls most of the city's rackets. The conversation is tense, but it follows the same script territory: tribute, protection, secrecy. By June, Detroit has a deal: 12% slightly lower than Harlem, because their operation is smaller. Baltimore in July, 10%. Cleveland in August, 13%. Philadelphia in September, 14%. Each city thinks they're negotiating their own unique arrangement. They don't realize they're following a template, becoming part of a network that's spreading across the industrial north like mycelium under a forest floor. Bumpy becomes exactly what Capone envisioned the franchise broker. The man who speaks both languages, who can sit with black numbers runners in the afternoon and Italian mobsters in the evening, translating between worlds that aren't supposed to touch. It makes him powerful. Dangerously powerful. In Harlem, he's no longer just Stephanie St. Clair's lieutenant. He's a power broker in his own right. When disputes arise, and they always do, both sides come to him. When new operators want to set up shop, they ask Bumpy for permission first. He's become untouchable in a way that has nothing to do with violence. You don't shoot Bumpy Johnson because he's connected to everyone. Killing him would collapse the entire system, trigger wars, in 6 cities simultaneously. He's more valuable alive than dead. The police treat him differently now. They know he's dirty, know he's running numbers, know he's connected to something bigger. But they can't prove it, and more importantly, their bosses don't want them to prove it. Because the system is working. Crime rates in black neighborhoods stabilize, gang violence drops, the numbers operations run smooth, providing jobs and economic circulation in communities that banks have redlined into poverty. From a certain cynical angle, organized crime is doing more for black economic development than the government ever did. Is that victory, or is it the most damning indictment imaginable that black Americans had to make deals with white gangsters because the legitimate economy locked them out? Bumpy wrestles with that question through the late months of 1929. As the stock market crashes in October and the Great Depression begins as breadlines form and banks fail, the numbers game keeps running. People with no money still scrape together nickels for a chance to hit. Hope is a commodity that appreciates during hard times, and every quarter 15% flows to Chicago. By the end of 1929, Capone has learned everything Bumpy promised to teach him. The Chicago outfit's gambling operations have been reorganized along the lines of the Harlem numbers model. standardized procedures, professional management, less violence, more efficiency. Bumpy's 3 trainers return to Harlem in December, their work complete. They don't talk about what they taught or who they taught it to. Some secrets are best kept. In January 1930, Bumpy receives a telegram. Just 3 words, "Well done, AC." He burns it immediately. That night, he walks through Harlem. 125th Street is alive despite the depression. Music spills from clubs. Couples walk arm in arm. Children play stickball under streetlights. It looks like freedom. But Bumpy knows the truth. Harlem is thriving inside a cage he helped build, a cage made of percentages and protection territory and tribute, a cage that keeps predators out but also keeps Harlem contained. He touches his chest, feeling the weight of the gold watch Capone sent him as a thank you gift. Expensive, elegant, engraved with initials that aren't his, a collar disguised as a gift. That's what this whole arrangement is, really. A collar that looks like autonomy, a cage that feels like freedom, a deal that saved Harlem by binding it to the very power structures it was built to resist. Was it worth it? Ask that question in 1930, and Bumpy would say, yes. Peace is worth the price. Ask it in 1940, after a decade of tribute payments, and the answer gets murky. Ask it in 1960, after Bumpy spent time in prison, and come out to find Harlem still paying, still dealing, still caught in the same system, and maybe the answer is something else entirely. On that cold January night in 1930, walking through a neighborhood that's finally briefly safe, Bumpy Johnson allows himself to believe he made the right choice, even if he'll spend the rest of his life wondering. The meeting at the Lexington Hotel wasn't a fairy tale about breaking barriers. It was arithmetic written in blood and cash. Al Capone looked at his empire and saw an expiration date. Prohibition was dying. Violence was expensive. The feds were circling. He needed sustainable revenue, and Bumpy Johnson walked in with a blueprint for the future. What happened next reshaped American organized crime, not through conquest, but through collaboration, not through violence, but through percentages. 6 cities, 15 years, millions of dollars flowing from black communities to white criminal organizations, buying stability 1 quarterly payment at a time. Here's the brutal lesson. Sometimes survival doesn't look like victory. Sometimes protection is just exploitation with better PR. Harlem got peace, but paid for it every 90 days. The cage was golden, but it was still a cage. Bumpy Johnson became untouchable, not because he was the toughest, but because he made himself essential to a system that needed him alive more than dead. He didn't break the rules. He learned to use the rules that society created in the only way 1928 America would permit a black man to accumulate power. Was it genius, or surrender salvation, or sell out? If you want more buried histories like this, the deals that never made headlines but changed everything, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment. Was Bumpy Johnson a pragmatic survivor who protected his community? Or did he trade Harlem's soul for temporary peace?